Hi again guys, and welcome to another unicorn car, if you want to look at it that way. Certainly secret unlockable car from the ToCa franchise. This time though from the second game, we're going away from the world of crazy stuff like tanks in the first game, and now to something which is certainly special, very rare, certainly a unicorn of the supercar world, and also one which makes sense, because of course ToCa 2 in particular is a very blatantly British game when it comes to the cars. Of course you have Audis and Volvos and Renaults and that in there, but as far as the special cars go, it's completely different to the first game, because on the first game you've got the tank, which is technically British because it's kind of like a Daimler Ferret underneath, but at the same time not really, and you've got the Cadillac Buretts, which of course is American. On this game though, pretty much all, if not all, of the secret cars are British. You've got the Grinnell, the Fiesta, the Cobra, which is an AC Cobra rather than the Shelby one. This car, the XJ220, very, very British focused in terms of the secret cars. And this one for me is the one that always stood out the most from this second game, way back when I was a kid, because I'd already played Gran Turismo 2 before this, and those two games are among the only games to actually feature this incarnation of the TVR Speed 12. This is the original Speed 12, what was originally codenamed the 7-12 concept, the engine, 7.7 litre V12, and this one was of the two, because of course you had this one which came out, what was it, 98, I think, the original concept, or 97, and then the later generation, the facelift, which became much more bulbous looking and more like a Cerbera, a traditional Cerbera that is, in the year 2000. Now I personally prefer that car, it's one of my favourites. This one though definitely has a special place for me. I've got a model car of this generation, and this one certainly looks more like a full-on race car straight out of the box. It looks like a GT1 car already, whereas I would say the later model, the year 2000 shape, the Mark II if you will, looks more like a traditional supercar shape, like a big powerful supercar. And then when it's a race car it makes sense, but this one looks like a race car already. Now I believe the weight on this one was actually lower than the second generation by a fair amount, well under a ton, and the horsepower per ton, given that it has around 800 horsepower, is massive. In fact, it was pretty much untouched at the time in the supercar world. As far as on ToCa goes, well, of course you don't have a ton of use from the car, as you don't really with most of these special vehicles, but it's certainly a very, well, a special experience to have cars like this featured on a game. They are very much so unicorns, the kind of cars that when they show up, you're very happy to see them. For me personally, cars like that would be stuff like the Ford GT90. When that pops up in a game, it's a special occasion. Or the Chrysler ME412. These super rare cars to see featured in a game, but when they are featured, they're always guaranteed to be at the very least really fast. Not necessarily easy to drive though, and that certainly goes for this one. Now the first thing that you notice when you drive the car is the sound. It sounds fantastic. Even for a PS1 game, it sounds big and brash and imposing, which is what the Speed 12 is all about. The second thing that I noticed, as you could see early on in this video, was that the handling is actually surprisingly good. Now that may seem to contradict the footage that you can see, because I am of course sliding around with the car quite a bit, but the reason for that is because I was basically just having fun, not concentrating too much on getting a good driving line, and eventually just hooning it around the track, basically, seeing what kind of speed you can get, how it can take a corner if you push it hard, slamming on the brakes, and incidentally, you can very clearly both feel and see that it doesn't have ABS. It locks up very easily, so again, you have to be a full-on pro in terms of the approach that you take to the car. You don't need to be a pro in terms of experience, but you need to think like a pro would. Approach it as this thing, this force of nature, almost, that demands respect, and if you don't give it that respect, it'll just spit you out of a corner and throw you off the track, and we love it for that. That's one of the defining features of the car. It's almost like a Cobra in a funny kind of way, but a much bigger, more powerful variant of what the Cobra essentially is, a really overpowered kit car or go-kart. That's what the Speed 12 has always felt like. And in terms of overpowered, there are very few cars which are as overpowered as this. Around 800 horsepower naturally aspirated would be a challenge for a race car to put that kind of power down with so little downforce. So for a road car with inferior tyres, well, of course it's going to be a challenge. No driving aids, no traction control, no ABS, none of that. A pure analog monster. And in a way, it was kind of like the death of that era, because if you think of all of the supercars to come after the Speed 12, they all became very quickly more and more electronic in nature. Even in the late 90s, but especially once you moved into the 2000s, you had supercars which started to become very F1 inspired, very heavily borrowing from F1 tech, stuff like the Enzo, the SLR, various others as well, and they started to steadily become more and more tech heavy to the point where we are now, with hybrids and EVs and all that kind of thing. That's not bad, it's just of today, whereas this is almost like the end of an era, the end of old school, terrifyingly fast supercars like the Diablo, the Shazetta, the Door 962 road car, stuff like that. So overall, this is a car which is certainly worth unlocking if you do get the chance. You can also use a cheat code to unlock all of them. That's what I did to save time, and you can easily find those codes on Google as well. And in fact, I'll flash the code up that I used on the screen so that you can use that if you want to. It's certainly worth a look. There are plenty of others as well, and this one is probably one of the most challenging special cars in the game, but also one which is appropriate to be that way. It should be challenging. Overall, it was very nice to have the opportunity to drive this car again because, as I said, this variant is featured so few times and on so few games that it really does always feel special, and it is one of the ultimate unicorns of the British supercar scene. So if you do get the chance to use it, I hope you have a ton of fun with it, and of course, I'll see you guys next time for another ToCa unicorn review. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.